Okay, AI, I am an average punter off the street. Explain the SpaceX IPO to me without being boring and tell me why it's going to affect my bank account.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. This week, we're going to explain the financial tool that makes SpaceX's flotation everyone's business, especially you and I. Plus, our guest, creative technologist and CTO with Massive Attack, Andrew Melchior, talks about the headache that generative AI is causing for the music industry.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. Joining me as always, our editor-in-chief, Niall Kitson. SpaceX is without a doubt not only the story of this week, but absolutely next week and the week after. So we're going to get into that. But very, very quickly, seeing as we're talking about space, Blue Origin had what they call an anomaly. What was the actual anomaly?
Do you know what? I actually feel I feel we had the bit of the commentator's curse, because we were talking about Blue Origin in glowing terms last week. And then sure, the following day, didn't their rocket explode on the launch pad, costing, what is it, $1 billion in damage?
Oh, that's just to the launch pad.
Yeah.
That's not including the rocket. That's just the launch pad.
Well, there's no getting the rocket back.
Well, actually, that's true. But do you know what's interesting about it is that it's going to take them, I thought it would take much longer. It's going to take them maybe up to Christmas to rebuild it.
Really?
And they actually think that this will be an advantage because their rocket facility and launching facility was like XYZ, but because they have to rebuild it, they will start from scratch and actually will be able to improve it.
Okay. Well, that's certainly one way of looking at it.
It is.
I mean, the footage was really impressive. I mean, did you see that clip as soon as it went up?
That was a big bang, all right, wasn't it?
I was like, looking forward to Blue Origin. Oh.
Listen, speaking of space, let's get into SpaceX and their flotation. Now, I think this is interesting because you're looking at SpaceX's flotation as the end of the world, and I'm not.
Yeah. And I think it's important we go through this kind of slowly, because there are a few moving parts in there that will make you go, huh. And a few that at the start you will most likely be quite optimistic about. Okay? So the very short version, trading begins this day week, the 12th of June. The market value is $1.75 trillion. That's a record market valuation, and it's not even close. 555.6 million shares will be released at a price of $135 each. And something very, well, it's a little bit, I don't want to call this fishy, but 30% of these shares are being allocated to retail investors. You and me. Guys like you and me. We like the brand. We like Elon. We'll go, I'll chip in for a couple of shares. Why not? $135 is a pretty good price. So that's the top line stuff. That's probably what attracted you first, Dusty. What do you make of the valuation and the share price, more important?
Excuse me, Judge. I object to the statement that it attracted me.
Okay, right.
Certainly didn't. Listen, you can talk about numbers, and then I much prefer looking at percentages. Okay, so it's the highest market value for any IPO. Okay, yada yada, whatever. About 30% of the shares are going to be put on the market, and that's retail investors like you and I, or pension funds and whoever else is able to buy stocks and shares on the market, on the NASDAQ, okay? What is ringing alarm bells in my head, ding, 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 is that the other 70% of the shares is pretty much held by one person.
Well, there's one person asterisk. Basically, I mean,
but more or less, Elon Musk is maintaining control of the company by holding a huge amount of the remaining shares. Only 30% to be made.
We knew that. We knew that was the structure going into things. There's a few things we don't know, and a few things that, when you think about it, make you go, "Okay, fine business, but where's $1.75 trillion coming from?"
Okay, go on, tell me.
First of all, you're not buying shares in SpaceX. You're buying shares in 3 companies, right? Mm-hmm. You're buying shares in Starlink. You're buying shares in the rocket business. And you're also buying shares in XAI. That's the combined entity, right? Those are the 3 wings. Only one of which makes any money, which is Starlink. Starlink does all right. If SpaceX was Starlink, it would be a perfectly fine, profitable business with plenty of upside and very high ceiling. The actual rocket business, SpaceX, as you would know it, loses money, not as much as you might think. I think it loses something like 600 million or something like that, and is reliant on government contracts to make money. And then the third part of the business, XAI, is an absolute disaster. It was built from the ground up in a fit of pique by Musk and 11 other founders, partners from OpenAI, Anthropic. There was some university interest in there as well.
They're all saying now. Can I just state now? Yeah. Remember, Niall said the AI side of the business is a disaster. Continue.
Yeah. What has happened is that all the original founding members of XAI have left. Musk came out and said, "Do you know what? Yeah, we have to rebuild this thing from scratch." And their long-term commercial plan is to get into enterprise applications, very much the same way that Microsoft is treating OpenAI. Now, when your AI strategy with Grok is basically, this is going to be right-wing friendly, I don't really want to have my business run by a right-wing friendly AI. I just want something that will leave the politics at the front door and just give me what I want and help me solve problems. So that's where, for me, alarm bells start going, yeah, okay, $135 for a business that actually isn't making money and doesn't have, it won't be making money for a long time, because that's, when the rocket business will eventually start making money, hopefully of its own, the more missions there are. So you want to interject?
No, I want to just ask you how all of this is going to affect my bank account.
Okay, right. This is where things start getting complicated, because the proverbial devil is in the details. So let's have a look at kind of the rules, if you will, under which this IPO is happening. And these are new rules. It's all legal. New rules that the NASDAQ brought into effect last month. Very fortuitous timing. I'm not going to say one thing is related to the other.
But you are. And I would concur with you. I would concur with you. I think it smells of fish.
Okay. So here we are. What's interesting for SpaceX is to get into the NASDAQ 100, which is the 100 biggest companies on the exchange, right? That's the 100 companies with the highest market capitalization. That pretty much puts SpaceX number one with a bullet into the NASDAQ 100. However, there are a couple of things that might have affected whether it actually makes that 100 or not, right? One of which is what they call sort of a seasoning period. They don't just take you off the bat, right? You enter the exchange and there is a 3-month, not quite a waiting list, but a 3-month period at which you get to see how the shares perform. Are they a meme stock? Do they fly up and then people stop buying them? Is there, a total lack of demand because too many shares have been put on the market? All of these things, are happening and they're variables, right? NASDAQ have reduced that window from 3 months to 15 trading days, right?
Yikes. Okay.
So you are still in kind of new and shiny territory at that stage, I would argue, right? So that's one of the rules that changed. There's a second rule that changed, which is what they call the free float requirement, right? Which is basically at any point in time, there has to be a certain percentage of shares actually on the market that you can buy and share and trade. That's what makes it a publicly listed company as opposed to one that's in private ownership, right?
Yeah.
So now NASDAQ have passed a rule that says, previously 10% was a good number. SpaceX said, you know what, we would rather there weren't that many shares out there, 4 to 5%. We're happy enough with that. The NASDAQ introduced a rule that said, okay, we can deal with that. And they also released something called a hidden multiplier, right? And what this rule is that if your free float is under 20%, the NASDAQ will treat your actual number as if it's 3 times bigger than it actually is. So you can end up having a very, very small free float in percentage terms than anybody else that has to play by the rules in the market. So
that's it. Now, hang on. Just so as I understand that is kind of like it's going to cost 15 quid to get in and see the movie. Yeah. And you rock up and you go, look, I've only a £5. And the movie owner goes, do you know what? Let's just pretend it's 15 quid. In you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Right. So this is all leading to a condition of manufactured demand, right? So the market has been, engineered in such a way that there are a lot more shares than you might expect going out into the public. So what's going to happen with these shares? Well, SpaceX sort of in sort of a quiet statement, sort of saying the quiet part out loud, basically saying, we reckon there is going to be a lot of interest from retail investors, which is to say people that like Elon, people that like SpaceX, people that believe in the mission. The company is relying on an awful lot of these guys to come on board and buy shares. Now, one other side effect of being in the NASDAQ 100 is that index funds, as a matter of course, invest in all the companies in the NASDAQ 100. So if you have a pension, for example, and it's, linked to a fund that buys in the NASDAQ 100, guess what? You have just bought shares in SpaceX, a company that doesn't make money, whose share value is unproven and whose value is being propped up by financial instruments and hopefully the goodwill of early adopters that, see this as a long-term investment. So it is not a particularly enticing how would you say, presentation for me anyway.
So basically what you're saying is that it all looks a little bit dodgy, the way this is being listed. The numbers are so big that it's scary, that if it goes ahead and it fails, it's going to affect pensions. It's also going to affect the value of the stock market in all, which could lead to a downturn in the financial markets, which then gets into our bank accounts where, our money is not going to be worth as much. All thanks to one Mr. Musk. Well,
I mean, I wonder what other conversations were had in back rooms to make this happen, and whether affiliation to a certain political administration has anything to do with it.
A movie will be made and it will be fascinating. We'll have to wait 10 years.
Important to stress, none of this is illegal, but this is what's happening.
Okay. All right. Okay. Right. Can I calm you down somewhat?
Oh, please do.
Because I'm an optimist, all right?
Yeah.
Tin Hatter, an optimist. That's what it says on my business card, all right? Listen, I worry also about this whole SpaceX flotation, all right? And I think the first and most obvious problem is, and you said it, It's not one company, all right? It's three companies that are bundled together. Two of them are losing tons of money, and one of them is doing fairly okay. All right, so that's the first thing. You're not buying. Do you remember the mortgage crisis back in 2008? And they said the reason was they bundled in a whole load of turds in with a golden child. Yeah. This is exactly what's happening with SpaceX. All right. When you look at it, they're saying that the total addressable market is what they call it. It means this is the amount of money that we could make. All right. And they're saying that we could make $28 trillion. Okay. And we're valuing our shares at 1.6 trillion or whatever in order to make that 20. Sounds like a good deal. 1.6 to make 28. That sounds great. However, here's how they round it out between the three companies. Okay. Right. The rocket business. Okay. $500 billion. Now I'm rounding these just to get a simple number in your head. Okay. Sure. The rocket business, $500 billion. Starlink, the one that's making money, $2 trillion. The AI business, $26 trillion. The AI business. The vast majority of SpaceX is AI, and you have just rubbished it to hell. And I have to say, Niall Kitson, I 100% agree with you. It's a nightmare. It's a dog turd that's not even polished, if you ask me. All right. And we've seen what he's done with AIX, and we've seen what he's done with X/Twitter. All right. Yeah. Disaster. And that is like 90% of what the whole thing. So, anyways. We've had stock things before where we have survived them. Here's on the on the good side of things, right? Facebook went in; it was completely overvalued, and within a few days, lost I don't know whatever of its value. Uber went in, and that was completely overvalued, and that lost a whole lot of money as well. So I imagine what's going to happen with SpaceX is that yes, it's going to go in and it's going to lose a whole lot of money and fairly quick. All right. I think it'll be even quicker. And here's where the danger is, because I don't think that SpaceX on its own is enough. All right. But if you lob in, like we mentioned Blue Origin at the start, all right, all it needs is for SpaceX to have one or two spectacular rocket explosions while this IPO is going on. Do you want to invest in our rocket company? We keep blowing them up on the ground. It's great. Okay. That's not going to help. Hang on. I haven't finished. We've got if Trump goes and does something crazy. If Elon goes and does something crazy, all right, we're looking at Anthropic and OpenAI are also willing to float. What if they go onto the market and then they both tank as well? All of these events combined could come together to bring a serious downturn in the market. All right. And that's where it could affect. But it relies on all of those things coming. I don't think SpaceX on its own, opening up at a high value and then losing maybe 50% of the value, is really going to affect us in Europe.
Okay. So here's a question for you, right? If you were to be given a choice of investing in Blue Origin or SpaceX, which would you take?
I wouldn't invest in either of them. That's my own, because I don't know enough about either of them. All right. So I wouldn't do it. I don't know enough about Blue Origin. Blue Origin seems to be the kind of the second runner. I like SpaceX because of the ambition that they have, because they want to do 10,000 rocket launches a year. And at the moment, with the launch pad that they have, they're able to turn things around. It's like the Ryanair 25-minute turnaround, all right? SpaceX do it in 48 hours. They launch a rocket, 48 hours later, they're ready to launch another one. It's unbelievable. It's amazing. But it's just not making money. You say, yes, it could make money, but not for a very long time. So no, I wouldn't invest in it. I don't know enough about Blue Origin. All I think of when I think of Blue Origin is blinking Katy Perry. Yeah, you know, and so that rules it out of my head. So no, I wouldn't in any of them. Yeah, but overall, I don't think if SpaceX fails, it's not going to fail the full market. Another reason for that actually is because it's initially going to go out on the NASDAQ, but it's not going to be on the S&P 500. It's going to take, I think, maybe a year for it to be listed on the S&P 500, at which point things will have calmed down considerably, all right? Yeah. On the NASDAQ, the actual NASDAQ index, I think the total value of it is around 25 trillion. So even if this whole SpaceX is worth 1.75 trillion, it's still just a fraction of the NASDAQ overall. And both of those things all affect the American market. It's not necessarily the rest of the world. And I think there's enough trepidation in the world where people are sitting back going, "Woo, oh, I don't know." So I think I think we're going to see something spectacular, and I think it's going to be an amazing fail. But I think we'll be fine. I think your money in your bank account is okay for now. But if you can, because I know like you're sitting on a mountain of stuff, I would split that up into chunks of 100 grand and put it into different bank accounts. It's a problem many of us have. To get the EU guarantee. Have I made you feel a little better?
You have, Dusty. You have.
All right, okay. Grand. Okay, listen, let's get away from that idiot Musk and talk about other...
Let's talk about another IPO.
Yeah, there you go. Another IPO. Anthropic. Oh my goodness. All right. So, and it's interesting because whatever happens with SpaceX is going to have a huge effect on Anthropic. Where are we with their IPO?
Yeah, they filed the paperwork. Well, I haven't seen anything of it yet. I don't think anyone has. The company is being valued at just over 965 billion, which is actually more than OpenAI has been valued at, which I think is really interesting because OpenAI makes more than Anthropic does at the moment. But I guess if you're looking at trajectories, certainly Anthropic has taken over the mind share, and ChatGPT is in all sorts of trouble in the courts. So I guess being the friendly face of AI has its benefits. And bear in mind also that Anthropic is going to benefit from the same rule changes that SpaceX has on the NASDAQ. Yeah. So whatever sort of trading patterns that promotes. I don't know. I got a quote here from the Chief Strategy Officer of Era 4, which is sort of an AI consultancy. This is from the BBC. And what this woman, Sana Karagani, said is, what we're going to get is a precedent, a gauntlet laid down for metrics that might matter. And I think that's a great way to look at it. Metrics that might matter. Because in tech, we are obsessed with growth, not necessarily return. We want devs using thousands and thousands of tokens, only to discover that it's actually roughly as cheap / expensive to employ a junior developer as to try to replace them with AI. That's kind of where we're going at the moment. So that calculation of value is really something we're going to have to look at. And that's something that I think is going to kind of hang over any AI IPO. It's like, what you're doing, it's interesting, but what value does it deliver? And how do we gauge how far along that journey you are?
Okay. Also with Anthropic this week, they have been expanding some access to Mythos. Yeah. Mythos.
This is the model that was too dangerous to let loose on the world. You remember a couple of months ago. It's a you might remember it's a large language model for coding, and it was discovered that it was really, really good at identifying bugs in software, some of which were decades old, some which are 0-day flaws, some which were critical flaws. It was the sort of thing that, if you were to let it loose, it was just, manna for cyber criminals. So Anthropic said, okay, right, hang on, we're going to take this handy. So I think they initially had, they only let it go to like a couple of dozen people, I think, at first. And now they've said, okay, we're going international with this. 15 countries, 150 organizations, including EU member states, which is important because we're very interested in protecting our people in this part of the world. So we're going to see how it goes. This is being distributed under what they call Project Glasswing. That's sort of what they've termed the. I'm not even going to call it a rollout. Just how this is being passed along to organizations, how this is being managed. So good to see it reaching further places. Good to see it landing in the EU. Good to see it regulated. Again, a cautionary tale for software devs. Always check for security, because it might seem like what you're doing is good enough now, but hey, there's always something smarter than you out there.
All right. Moving on. We're almost out of time, so just one or two other quick stories. New survey out this week from Swappy, who are a Finnish company working across the EU, and they sell refurbished phones. They have a survey out that says that Irish people are more likely to keep unused phones at home compared to the EU. Apparently 69% of Irish people have unused phones sitting around the house, whereas it's 50% in the EU.
Yeah, and you know what? Go pre-loved, folks.
Absolutely.
Recycle your phones, sell them on.
This is the point of the story. It's more and more people are selling. It's up 11% year on year, which I suppose is good. And now pre-loved is 10% of the overall phone market in Europe, which is terrific.
Right.
I have got the same thing in that, should I sell my phone? Should I not sell my phone? And I want to show you, I had my phone. It has not. I've had it for 2 or 3 years. It's been performing very well. It does everything that I wanted to do. Okay, except the battery was running out. The battery was running down. So I decided to replace the battery, and I should have known better. I got the battery, no problem. There was a little kit to go with it. All you have to do is ease the back off your phone, replace the battery. So off I went, and I'm going to show you now the back of my phone. You can.
Oh, well done. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So basically, to describe the back of my phone, it looks like a small child has been smashed into a car windscreen. Don't ask me why I came up with that particular description.
I would just say it looks like somebody took a hammer to it.
Oh, yeah. Well, you could say that as well. All right. However, when I was trying to ease off the back of the phone, it wouldn't come off, and I had to force it. And then eventually it cracked, and it cracked into a million different pieces and stuff like that. Because what I didn't know, and I do now know, is that they glue the back down. They don't just glue it. They use industrial strength and buckets of it to really hammer it in. I don't know why. Anyways, I'm not too bothered because I, like everybody else, keep my phone in a cover. Okay. So once I reassembled the battered back cover plate for the actual phone and I put it into its protective cover, sure, nobody would know.
It's true.
But the phone now is, I'm getting, kind of a day and a half out of a full battery charge, which is exactly where I was. And I don't see any need for a new phone, which is really annoying me because you know me. If there's one thing I love, it's buying new things. Yeah. And I'm like, can I really justify spending 1,500 quid to buy the same thing that I already have?
There you go. That's why the pre-loved market is so important.
Time for one last story, though. Aaron Brockovich. Oh, my God. What are we talking about Aaron Brockovich on Tech Radio for?
Yeah. Aaron Brockovich, of course, very, what would you call her? An anti-corporate crusader. Got famous by calling out, I can't remember the name of the company, for poisoning. It's
a water company. Yeah,
it's a water company. Now she is taking a look at data centers because the United States leads the world in data centers at the moment. It's got 4,184 data centers and many, many more in the works. Compared to China, which is 369, what they're calling listed facilities. Whether that's actually, accurate, who knows? I think that's a number from Statista, though, so that'd be reasonably good. So what she has put up on her website, and it's well worth looking at. It's the website is brockovichdatacenter.com, and it's basically looking at what data centers are in construction, which are being applied for, all that kind of thing. And she's got a wonderful map up as well, and showing where everything is happening. And one trend that is emerging that she has identified is that an awful lot of places where data centers are scheduled to be built actually have not great supplies of water, which of course is one of the main
ways
things
of cooling it down.
For
a
data center. You need water, you need electricity, and you don't need neighbors. Those are the three things. because these things are noisy, as we have discovered. And guess what? A lot of data centers are being zoned for places that don't have a lot of water, and will ultimately end up pushing up utility charges. Now, we know all about the high cost of utility charges over here. In Ireland, we pay more than anyone else in the EU.
Oh my God. And the bills are going up shockingly as well.
The bills are going up shockingly. 22% of electricity in Ireland goes to data centres, which is more than the population of our urban areas, not the entire population of the island of Ireland, but just the urban areas. And guess what? You think that demand comes for free? No, we're paying for it on the double. So, Ireland is being looked at as, this is a direct quote from a report here, a cautionary tale in a report by the UN, the UN's Institute for Water, Environment and Health. So, for as much as we say, moratorium on data centers, great, fantastic. Yeah. If there isn't sustained investment in new infrastructure, we're going to know more and more about high energy prices.
And particularly with El Nino coming and climate change. And it's funny how you can see all the little things circling. I'm going to give you nightmares now. You can see all of these dangerous things kind of circling around, and they're all going to collapse at the same time as SpaceX does, which will bring down the entire stock market. So not only will we have no money in the bank, we'll have no electricity and we'll have no heat in our radiators, Niall. Yeah. Are you looking forward to it?
Do you know what I'm looking forward to?
What?
On-device LLMs.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It. Okay. Yeah.
Goodbye, data center.
Yeah. We'll wait. How big will your on-device then be? You'll be walking around with a wheelbarrow.
Well, they're not huge, and you need 16 gigs of RAM to be comfortable.
All right. Okay, grand. Listen, that's a conversation for another day. But for today, Niall, as always, thanks for bringing us up to date with so much good news this week.
Delivering Irish tech news since 2006. This is Tech Radio.
Generative AI models rely on masses of training data of all kinds to create text, images, and music with varying levels of success. This presents musicians with the problem of how to improve ownership and to protect their own art from being used without permission. Andrew Melchior is a creative technologist who has worked with acts like Bjork and Massive Attack. Niall Kitson met him at last week's Dublin Tech Summit to find out more about Genotome, a trust layer for creators, rights holders and platforms to verify the origin and integrity of recordings.
Andrew, we're pretty familiar with bands sort of branching out into different areas. For example, Slipknot have somebody dedicated to handling media. I've never come across a band that has the title of CTO. So tell us a little bit about your experience with Massive Attack and how you came to bring or extend the band into the field of technology.
Well, that's a good question. So I've always been interested in technology and music. My grandfather was in the Royal Corps Signals in the war, and he got me working with electronics and making radios and little synthesizers when I was a kid. I started working in MIDI. I started working in early software recordings. I've always been interested in technology. And then Massive Attack in the 90s were doing something very interesting, because obviously their first forays as artists were using samplers, and part of that whole sampling wave of sort of music concrete but applied to beats and DJ culture. And by 98, they'd also broken the mold by being the first band to ever stream an album in its entirety, which was Mezzanine. It was the first record ever to be streamed in full online in 98. Virgin Records did it. So I was always aware of that. And then I was also aware of their live innovations, where they were using people like United Visual Artists were working with them to create these visuals that included lots of data. So they were one of the first bands to create feeds from the internet that would come into their visual landscape of their live performances, which is quite interesting. So they've always been technically advanced, and I was always kind of in awe of that, but I didn't know them at that point. Anyway, one way or another in the circle of life, I ended up in the early 2012, 13, 14, around that time. I was working for an old boss of mine from Virgin, and he's now passed away, unfortunately. And Ray Cooper, he was called. And Ray actually signed Massive Attack to Circa. he set up a label with Ashley Cooper in the 90s that Richard Branson paid for, and Ray actually signed him, and Ray actually signed Massive, and he also signed Nana Cherry and people like Nelly Hooper were knocking around and stuff like that. And Ray introduced me to Mark Pickin, Massive's manager, because Ray and I were working advising this US company making augmented reality glasses called Magic Leap. Now Magic Leap came and went; they were a bit vaporwary, but the ambition was to kind of try and get musicians to understand there was a new medium of mixed reality media that was like not VR, it was synthetic interactive media that was subjective. And Ray said, we should let's go and talk to Mark and Rob, because Rob's a massive nerd and loves technology and music. So I got to meet Rob very first time. They were doing their show at Manchester International Festival with Adam Curtis. And I basically walked into that with Ray, and we got on really well from sort of day one, really. And started sort of really this idea of, Rob's a very visual person, and obviously also very much into data science, electronics and sampling and synthesizers. You know that just by who he is. So he was fascinated by this idea of how can we make media that's reactive, that's non-linear, that's subjectively changing based on your environment. If you're wearing devices that have got sensors on you and things. And there's obviously elements of that that are also quite political in so much that, where does privacy begin and end? What are you allowing to share? What is happening to us when we're being monitored by all these devices? So he's interested in that part as well, the ethical part of it. So we started running some experiments together to try and sort of come up with some proofs of concept, really, like these little sandboxed idea models that we would come up with. So we started messing around with the stems of some of the albums, some of the outtakes of some of the albums as well. And we did a few experiments. We kind of thought to ourselves, well, how can we go with this? So just to get back to your point, not wander off into the garden of detail, the interesting point here is that as an artist and as artists, Massive Attack have always been very interested in pushing the boundaries of the visual envelope and the sonic envelope of what they do. I came along with lots of hopefully interesting insights into these emerging technologies. And at a point, I think we were at, where were we? I think we were Eden Project. And we were backstage and they played. And Rob and I just said, Rob goes, we should probably get you to be like the CTO. And we had a good laugh and we said, yeah. Because we've been working with Johnny Ive and the team at Apple when they were doing the watch, the first version of the watch. And so we just thought, well, that's super nerdy and nobody's had a CTO as a band before. So it kind of started off as a joke, but it ended up being quite serious because what that moniker gives you is ability to open certain doors. And so from that point on, we also started doing work with towards this. I don't know how many people know about this, because some people know about it, some people don't. For instance, we converted the Mezzanine album into synthetic DNA as an objective exercise in what is authentic and what does authorship mean if you're living in the world of overabundance, So we created millions of synthetic DNA molecules of Mezzanine, and Rob, being Rob, injected them into packs of 2-pack spray paint and started spraying thousands of copies of the album whenever he was making his artwork everywhere as a statement, So we've always been at this sort of nexus between the performance and music legacy of the band and also their creative partnerships, collaborations, but also broaden that agenda through towards the science and technology community. So we've done collaborations with Goldsmiths, we've done collaborations with DeepMind, we've done collaborations with manufacturers of spatial audio equipment, with people making, procedural software for synthesizers, that kind of stuff. And the idea is to sort of create the language that allows us to both test, experiment, and also examine, both for good and bad, what's coming through the pipeline and to see what that actually means for the audience and the artists,
There's sort of two technologies in particular I'd like to touch upon. One of which is sort of mixed reality, virtual reality, blended reality, of which you've got some experience. Curated reality, indeed. Do you think it was a case of maybe right technology, wrong time? That it just doesn't seem to have taken off. It seems to be leaving the zeitgeist and being taken over by AI. Where do you think things went wrong for VR, if it has at all?
It's a good question. So I was first aware of Magic Leap in 2012-13. And I remember Weta and Richard Taylor were involved. And they built this amazing demo, which was basically CGI. It was like a simulation of how they thought it would work. These robots having a gunfight with each other and you in an office, and things coming through the walls and everything. And it's a great dream and it's a great idea. And the idea of subjective wearable computers can change your subjective narrative and inject materials and characters and things. It's interesting, but fundamentally challenged by optics. So you can make super lightweight computers. Batteries are hard though. So look at the Apple Vision Pro, right? Batteries are hard and all the technology in the world doesn't seem to be doing a really good job of shrinking batteries at the moment. And then the problem with the eye is such a complicated thing. You have like vergence where the eye sort of but it has to move independently of each other to come find focal points. And so to try and control this space around the eye, the optic sort of field, it's very difficult with the technology that we've got because optics, the refractive index of light's pretty much written in stone, right? And the laws of thermodynamics equal refractive index. And what I saw was lots and lots of money being spent, acres of cash being spent on trying to crack the nut of how to create these wearables. And, the basic maths I can figure out is somewhere between 120, 140 billion dollars, incredible amounts of money, to try and turn this thing into the next iPhone. It's the iPhone killer. We're going to be wearable glasses trying to use computing as a surface on our eyes rather than on keyboards and screens. But the fundamental problem is the optics, because you can't do it without either having what looks like a scuba diving mask, which is one form factor, or you have to have like sort of near to eye optics, but they're really thick and they're like bottle glass. They just don't look very pleasant. And then there's the options with the weight and all this kind of thing. So the trouble was, it was a science fiction vision, a bit like transporters were in Star Trek. So Star Trek have given us communicators, and we've definitely learned that bit, the clamshell phone and beam me up Scotty. But the other vision of Star Trek was this idea of this sort of ubiquitous computing surface, which is interesting because that's what AI is, the ship's computer that talks to you and tells you about everything that's going on. We invented that. And then we invented the sensor stack. When you get on the planet's surface, you're looking at the iPad going, the oxygen levels or whatever. But the thing we haven't been able to do in this sort of the snow crash neuromancer vibe is to create this synthetic reality that we can just embody without feeling any disruption to the experience, the immersive experience. And that, I think, fundamentally comes down to the fact that optics have not been able to be, you can't just throw money at the laws of thermodynamics and expect to solve them as an R&D problem. And so I think it was a great quest, but the reality is it seems to have now moved into an area of more business-to-business, architectural visualizers, designing cars, group architectural sort of business-to-business applications. The idea of video games, a great example is my son, right? So my son's 15, but because of who I am, he's had every single headset to play with, right? So we've got, but it's a graveyard of headsets. And he did enjoy it, but it would never last longer than an hour. And then he didn't come back to it. And he would go, "This is all right," but none of his friends, some of his friends did it, but I thought it was very interesting because I didn't use my child as a crash test dummy, but obviously I watched him curiously and went, well, if he can't see the magic in this and he can't be bothered with it, then what is actually happening, And so I think it's just failed to launch, and maybe it's just we're waiting for some sophisticated explosion in quantum computing or some sophisticated way of trying to understand the vertex of all these lenses and trying to figure a way to do it. But it seems to me, if you wanted to be very honest about it, it looked very much like a military technology from heads-up displays for fighter planes that people were desperate to shoehorn into a civilian technology, and they just didn't want to do it.
Yeah, I think the examples of sort of the second wave of appreciation for Google Glass and Microsoft HoloLens were very much in that industrial application space, where I suppose both companies had to give up on the idea of extended reality being cool for any period of time. I suppose to talk about your current project, and you touched upon it earlier when you mentioned authorship. Of course, in the age of generative AI, we know that AI slop is a problem. 40% of the content on Spotify is AI generated, which sort of to my mind anyway, devalues the term authorship. What do you think it does to it?
So we've always made music using instruments and mediums, right? So obviously the Cristofori piano is a very complicated machine, you know, the loud, soft machine with the hammers and the strings. So there's always been a mediated version of creating musical instruments. You know, the lyres of Ur, one of my favorite topics. You know, the granddaddy of all string instruments depicted in Ur, in Babylon. And so we've always used our initiative to create technical solutions to how to make music and to wobble air, right? So that's not a big problem. And obviously in the last 30, 40 years, you've also had the implications of what computing's done to music. So you've had digital recording, you've had MIDI, you've had samplers, you've had synthesizers, no less, you know, with Victor Theremin even earlier in the 20s with the Theremin. So all that's so good, so far so good. Even the electric guitar, you know, obviously the genesis of electric guitar music. But I think where we've kind of dislocated ourselves from the authorship is where a device that can scrape all of humanity's creative output at hyperscale, and then like a kind of a demon version of collage can then concatenate that and to atomize it and then mash it all back together without any understanding of what made this soup of new music, if you want to call it that. I think that's problematic because a good example is a few weeks ago, Google did something called SynthID. They've been working on it for a while. But what happens now is if you upload a video of us in a nightclub or in a bar or on holiday, and in the background there's some music, if that music is copyrighted music, as you upload it to YouTube, Google now go, oh, we've spotted some copyrighted music on your video. Would you like us to replace it with music that sounds like that music? And so what Google seem to have done is they seem to have created generative AI music by scraping their own YouTube channels. And then they're now replacing the copyright holders of the music that was originally embedded in video with the synthetic version of the music that's been trained on the music that was in the video, thus alleviating anybody who's an author of any way of making money out of that music. To me, that seems like theft. And the problem with that is we are in a position where there's been this capture of the Creative Commons. And I mean, without being too contentious, I was reading some theories around this, around a theory espoused by a couple of academics back in 23, I think it was, saying that there's a form of data colonialism happening where value is extracted at a large scale, but you replace the cotton plantations and the ships with server farms and scraping algorithms. And this large scale Creative Commons value is then channeled up to only 4 or 5 different owners, and that they call that data colonialism. Now, I'm not sure I understand why that suddenly is a thing that society seems to want to tolerate, because when I was working at EMI in the 90s, we were dealing with Napster and spotty teenagers copying tracks, and we were working with, you know, to more hardcore degrees, torrent clients. And the only thing that really saved everything was Apple came riding in and with iTunes and made it easy to buy music again. But that was very different because Napster was shut down almost immediately. You know, and Lars Ulrich from Metallica is like on the vanguard and everybody makes them bankrupt. And it's a non-thing. What seems to have changed is the tone towards copyright, which is in that 25 years hence. Now, I go off and I scrape all of this material. I create a financial moat by people who are giving me hundreds of millions of dollars without due diligence. Because, you know, when you look at the decks for these companies, how does that work with the investor community? Where is the raw material from? We don't want to tell you. There's you know, I mean, I remember Mura Murati, the ex-CTO of OpenAI, I remember that squirming interview she gave where they were basically saying, where's all your data come from for ChatGPT? And she went, and just completely went off on a tangent. So I think what bothers me about this, the authorship seems to be being diluted by this quest for this kind of one ring to rule them all model, where you can just literally put everything on autopilot and, you know, the infinite number of monkeys and typewriters applied to all of human culture, but replacing the authorship in the interim. And I think that's quite alarming because you then have to ask yourself the question of what are we? And there's definitely a philosophical element to that, of the ethical thing of, well, if if something can paint and draw and write poetry, well, how can I make money drawing and painting and writing poetry? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a very interesting time to be in the music industry and a very interesting time to be in the technology industry, because it seems to me that there's been a disconnection between some of the rational social contract we had about the rights of people to have ownership of the things they make.
And I think part of it goes to, what does an author actually try to do? They try to make a connection with, the reader. They try to sort of make them feel something, whereas a lot of the AI applications seem to be more about problem solving.
Yeah, and the problem of authorship, though, if you think about it in some ways, a control of the media is something to be thinking about. So obviously I work with Massive Attack, and we, the band and myself, and also the other artists I work with, and David Bowie himself. David did one of the first MP3 downloads in the world with Telling Lies, and he immediately basically sold the future royalties to his catalogue as a Bowie bond, because he realised what was going to happen. And so when everybody else was worrying about Napster, David had basically already mortgaged the future royalties of all his music, so he didn't have to worry about Napster. He was home dry, because he spotted the trend. But the reality with that is that there is a political element to this, which is that my own theory, this is my personal view, is that music is a disruptor. So Woody Guthrie with a guitar, this thing kills fascists, right? Protest music. Bob Dylan singing about race murders in Oxford, in South of America, Deep South. The Vietnam War, apartheid. The social function of protest music has been a thing that's been driving cultural impact for decades, right? And I think the problem I have with algorithmic selection and curation and editorial parameters, because algorithms are weird, because, in the old days, radio selectors, there would be an editorial team and they would play listings every week, and what was on top of the pops and what was in the editorials of the magazines. And there was a person and there may be a team. Now, I think there still is a person, but we don't know who they are because they hide behind algorithmic programming, right? That bothers me, because there's no legible person to discuss why are these choices being made, and why are you playing me this, and why are you not playing me that? You can't do that because they're hiding behind this curatorial fence of algorithms. And then the other thing that bothers me about it is that generative AI music will not write offensive critical music because it's bad for shareholder value. So what happens these days is you're not going to get some snotty-nosed punk writing about the problems in Palestine, or the disassociation of what's going on in Ukraine, or those kind of protest things are being subsumed by this machine that's eating culture. And it's creating this really flat, homogenized narrative. And that's the thing that bothers me, because art is not comfortable sometimes. It's, listening to certain poets and their nasal narratives can annoy you. People writing about things that you hold sacrosanct, but they're critical of it. The way the human narrative evolves is through criticism and resolution and conversation. But if everything is homogenized into this middle ground, this soup, then you're also getting rid of the voice of protest. And you're in some ways censoring things, not by banning them, but by hiding them under piles and piles and piles of other stuff. It always reminded me, there was this great search engine, I can't remember the bloody name of it, obviously on while I being interviewed, but it used to bring you the last 5 search results of Google. And so you, instead of going to Google and getting the first 5 results of the internet, it would go to the last 5 results of the internet search. And I think that's an interesting analogy, because what seems to be happening with generative AI is you're getting a thing where the machine technical sort of software cloud complex of companies are now creating the editorial guidelines for how our society is managed.
Kind of the danger with AI slop being used to train models is that you're at risk of creating sort of an Ouroboros where you have, appalling material being trained on appalling material, that's something you're looking to counter at the moment with your current project, Genotone. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so AI slop is a bad thing. And the problem is the democratization of software tools to make music was amazing because everybody, a bit like being in a punk band, all you needed was a bass guitar and play 3 notes and you had a song, right? GarageBand was the great emancipator, and Apple pushed GarageBand for free in the operating system, and suddenly we could all record on DAWs with easy-to-use buttons, interfaces, and we could try and make music, right? So the great liberator of electronic music and recording. And then these mediums, such as various third-party companies, would allow you to put your music onto the internet. And suddenly there's this explosion of services where all you did was upload your track once, and it would send it to all of the different network platforms, so Spotify and Deezer and Bandcamp and all this kind of stuff. So the democratization of access to music has been great. The trouble is when you apply the democratization of access to music plus a generative music machine, you then get all these people in their bedrooms at home going, I'm going to make a song. And they press a single button and it generates a 4-minute song based on certain parameters. And the bit that's broken is the bit now that says, okay, you've created a song, but have you created a song on material that has been licensed? Have you created a song that is something you would put your name to? Or have you created something that's a bit like spam email where you're going to sit there and you're going to upload it and it's going to sit in the ingestion queue of this company like Spotify or Deezer or whatever. And it's just going to go onto the network and it's going to be part of tens of thousands of tracks that are going up every day. They've been auto-generated by literally minimal effort from dubious sources that probably haven't licensed the music that's been used to generate that generative AI. And as a result, it's the equivalent of spam. It's like filling up acres of hard drive space. It's creating this huge mishmash of oversupply, if you like, a glut of music. So Genotone, I came up with the theory because last year I was in certain rooms with quite depressed people from the music industry going, it's time to sell the farm because all of human music has been scraped. And there's a model of everything. And we should just become, become gardeners or retire. And I was like, well, that's about depressing. There must be something must be done, right? So I started looking into the problem area, and the problem area becomes very apparent very quickly, which is that to be able to upload something and distribute it takes the creation of an email account. And that's the only sum total check that happens, right? And maybe a fee that you pay to have it distributed if you're into vanity publishing, right? But that on its own means that there's an oversupply. So what can we do to reduce the amount of nonsense that's being pushed up there by people who are just literally pressing a button and another song? Today I've written 3 albums, by pressing buttons. So I came up with this idea that there needs to be some kind of provenance marker in music. So music as it stands, the files that are generated by your musical workstation, whether it's GarageBand or Logic Audio or Cubase or Ableton, whatever, those files have metadata attached to them. Metadata just gives you the author, the rights, the date it was created, all the good stuff that you label copy on original records was. And that thing is very easily applied to the file so that the file can then have this embedded data about the data. And when you run it into a machine, the machine tells you it's this album by this person, etc. What metadata is, right? The trouble with that, it's very easy to strip away. You can download tools for free that strip metadata like that, and it's gone. So the provenance of that track is then it's naked. You don't know who made it. You don't know any of the details about it. So that's the problem from a signal level and a file structure level. So I started thinking about narrative elements that could help me understand the problem. So a good analogy is silver. To sell silver, you have to legally obliged to put a hallmark on it. If silver doesn't have a hallmark on it, you're going to sell it illegally because it's possibly been melted down after being stolen. Good analogy, I think, so far to generative AI. So what I was saying, well, how can we create a sort of hallmark system for this file that's right-clickable and copyable and can be transported through systems and duplicated and then never have its provenance attached to it and it disappears into the system? So I came up with this theory that we could embed the equivalent of a watermark. So watermark's been around forever, originally in paper, So if you're posh, you have paper you hold up to the light and you can see the watermark, or a banknote, you can see the king or queen's head, whatever. Watermarking had been pilloried for many years in the music industry because it was imperfected technology. It caused audio aberrations. It was like a shimmering. You could hear the data that you were trying to embed in the sound. Interestingly, I went back to that research area and found that, ironically, GPUs that create the world of AI also create the cost of compute and the speed of compute needed to much more thoroughly and much less obviously implant a form of steganography into the wave file. So now you can embed a tiny little chip of data into the file, and you can write it across the waveforms. So it's not just like I suppose a bit like the metal strip through a banknote, right? And instead of just being at the header where you can cut it off, you can scatter write it throughout the tracks. And it's the thing called psychoacoustic masking, which is quite clever. So it reads the waveform, a bit like an audio fingerprint, like Shazam does. And you can embed this chip throughout the file. And hopefully, fingers crossed, it can't be heard. That fundamentally changes the decision tree of what happens when music is made and distributed. So I now make my file and I embed my provenance marker in it, and it's cryptographically embedded, assigned to me, my identity, like a passport. And when that track goes up for distribution, the distributor can say, has this track been signed by a person? And if it's not been signed by a person, off it goes into the track of non-provenance, possibly AI slop, probably a deep fake, and we're not going to release it because it's not been signed. Pretty straightforward. If it has been signed, it goes into the system and thou shalt pass go, right? And so that's the fundamental premise of Genotone. We have proposed that a bit like genetic, genotype, tone, you get the jam, that we are proposing that now we are trying to build a standard, so it's not just some hot tech startup. We're going to try and turn it into sort of a boring old plumbing, where we create a standard where artists de facto go, okay, I've got my ID, my track is embedded in my track ID, and my ID is embedded in my piece of work, and the people who are going to distribute it are also going to check my embedding to make sure I am me and I'm entitled to, I'm not trying to pass myself off as Taylor Swift, for instance, and that can be distributed. And overnight you get rid of 2 billion spam tracks, overnight, like that. And then, quite interestingly, there's also this thing called black box royalties. And black box royalties is where the original track has been disconnected from its information about the composer, and therefore a payment is not made because there's a break between the material and the author. So we think this could also help solve some of those problems, which is it's going to make it easier to track down who needs to get paid because the information about the track that got played has not been separated from the data about who made it.
And in terms of adding that kind of watermark, it sort of throws up some fascinating possibilities about what other kind of information can be encrypted on the waveform as well, because there's an awful lot of administration work goes around songwriting. There's royalty collection, there's, here's the people involved in the song. Again, it's all the metadata. Is this the sort of application you could see for Genotone as well?
Yeah, so basically you can't put acres of data into the file because that is definitely going to start corrupting the sonic integrity of it. And so what we've decided is there needs to be an embedding that's very short and very slight amount of data. And then there needs to be the equivalent of a solver. So we have that data about what you're doing and who you are. We have a network connected file vault. And in that vault, there's a solver that says, okay, this ID is linked to this label copy. So you then got the connection to the ISRC codes, ISWC codes, all the good stuff that makes the music industry work and has made streaming work and has made, even from the CD-DB days, the idea of label copy work. So what we proposed is the elegant solution is make a very, very small chip that is the data stamp, if you like. Ironically, very similar to what replicants have in them in Blade Runner, a little serial number that's embedded in the fabric of the track. That serial number is cryptographically secured. So if you don't have the cryptographic key, it's not crypto, it's cryptographic key, you can't even unlock the number to be able to, for instance, clone it. So bad actors will not be able to go, I'm just going to rip that Genotone out and put it in my own track. So you'll need the cryptographically secure key to be able to read what's on that key. And then basically the solver will be also accessed by the people distributing the music, saying, here's the genotone, we've got the key to unlock it, what does it relate to? And here's all the track info. So we do believe it could be quite an interesting tool to make sure that the administration of music that people like the PRS and MCPS and performing rights organisations have are in the business of doing, and hopefully make that easier and more accurate.
And that was Niall Kitson chatting with Andrew Melchior. You can find out more about Genotone at their website, genotone.com, and that link in the show notes description area of this podcast.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. Do check out some of the other stories we have online for you, including...
Yeah, Microsoft backs away from OpenAI to focus on its own AI models. Europe looks at a life beyond Amazon, Microsoft and Google, and why Irish organisations are taking chances on shipping untested code.
All of those stories and more for you online right now at techcentral.ie. We're back again next Friday with a brand new show for you. In the meantime, please do share our podcast with a friend. If they're into tech and gadgets, tell them to search for Tech Radio Ireland wherever they get their podcasts. Until next time, from myself, Dusty, and from Niall Kitson, have a great weekend. Thanks for listening.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.